Okay.
The agenda then asks for an update on information that was provided for Sonoma. There was similar information be provided for both Fairview and Porterville. And so on table 2, regarding the projected number of beds being developed by facility by regional center, specific to the Fairview Developmental Center, a capacity of 238 beds is currently in progress by the regional centers who have most of the consumers at Fairview. There are 187 specialized residential facility beds, 9 adult residential facility, these are the medical model homes, the adult residential facilities for persons with special health care needs. There are 12 enhanced behavioral support home beds being developed, 6 intermediate care facility beds, and 24 community care facility beds. For Porterville, for that same chart for table 2, a capacity of 148 is currently in progress with the 4 regional centers that have primary responsibility for the majority of consumers at Porterville. There are 131 specialized residential facility beds planned, 9 of the medical model homes, 8 enhanced behavioral support homes, and we are assuming that with additional funding in 16-17 that it will increase capacity for 170 beds at Fairview and 130 at Porterville. Regarding table 3, the residential developmental seasonal time frame for completion specific to Fairview Developmental Center for the residential projects that are in progress to support consumers transitioning from Fairview. Regional centers report that 50 homes are expected to be open in calendar year 2016, 15 homes open in calendar year 2017, and 4 homes open in calendar year 2018. Similarly, for Porterville, the residential projects in progress report that at Porterville there are 33 homes that are expected to open in calendar year 2016 and 2 homes that are expected to open in calendar year 2017. And then for table 4, the transition activity for Fairview and Porterville, we're expecting of that total, there 238 individuals remain to transition, and we're expecting that of the total current population who have had, there's 65 who have had meet and greets only. There are those who have had initial activity and transition planning. There are 21. And those who have had a transition planning meeting and have identified placements and scheduled move dates, there are 3 at Fairview. For Porterville, there's an expected total of 366 individuals who will transition. Of that total, there are 11 who have had meet and greets, basically the initial activity. Of those who have had the initial meet and greets and a transition planning meeting, there are 8 of those individuals, and there are 8 who have had a transition planning meeting and identified a placement and are scheduled to move. So I think that takes us through all 9 questions, so happy to answer any questions.
And before I open it up to my colleagues, if you could just provide the updates you just gave us to your tables electronically for the committee,
Absolutely.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, much easier.
I was doing well with my note taking, then you lost me.
And we'll provide the
I appreciate that, because I was struck by, for example, on table 4, how further along you are in the process at Fairview compared to Sonoma. So I'd like to have those electronically. And just briefly, can you tell us why those numbers are higher?
Well, part of it, and I'm probably getting into a little deep water here because I'm not a program expert, but part of it has to do with the acuity of the individuals residing at both facilities and the availability of resources in the community.
In those communities.
Exactly. One of the things when we closed Lanterman, there were additional resources that were developed and that were not used for Lanterman movers, so they are available to individuals in the community. So as people from Fairview are ready to transition, there are more resources available to them.
Got it. Finance or LAO, any comments or questions before I open it up to members? LAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Meredith Worden with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We do have several comments related to the issues discussed here related to headquarters requests, CPP funding, as well as general fund risk related to decertification requirements, which I'll walk through. As it relates to the headquarters proposal, April finance letter, and DC closure activities, we've reviewed those proposals, find them reasonable, and raise no concerns at this time. With regard to the budget estimate related to the decertification of the intermediate care facilities at the developmental centers, the budget assumes federal funding. We just note that there is risk there with regard to the decertification requirements. We have concerns about Sonoma in particular. As has been discussed in prior hearings, there was a situation of immediate jeopardy at Sonoma Developmental Center during a site survey, of which the results are not yet complete or know of, that may determine whether or not the settlement may move forward in terms of continued federal funding. So more to come, and expect updates that may revise. With regard to the additional placement plan funding, as noted in your agenda, the proposed CPP funding we find is likely warranted, and withhold recommendation at this time, given the additional detail needed in terms of proposed amounts and expected potential updates at May revise. We find that the CPP funding is an important source in terms of moving towards timely closure and ensuring the unique residential health and social needs of the consumers are met, as well as likely meeting settlement requirements as outlined in the settlement agreement for Sonoma and possibly for the forthcoming agreements related to Fairview and Porterville. We also note in our analysis that we believe that additional transparency and budget detail is needed, as has been discussed here today and outlined in your agenda, in determining how those resources are being used and sync with transition planning. We would also note and agree with the staff comments that the transition planning seems to be, and placement seem to be behind as estimated, but would expect those to be updated at May revise. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance. Senator Monning.
Well, thank you for the comprehensive overview in addressing some of these questions. I want to offer my congratulations and welcome to Ms. Bargman in your new position. Thank you. Congratulations. And Mr. Doyle, I wanted to follow up on your response on question 7, page 15 of the agenda. You offered some helpful information on planning for dental and medical transition. And again, this may be more specific than the information you have at your fingertips, but in an earlier hearing, some of the customized support at Sonoma for beds, shoes, wheelchair adaptation for the needs of that community. How is that factored in? How will those services follow the patients to community placement?
And that's an issue, Senator, that we are still continuing to work through. While we will continue to provide those services at not only at Sonoma, but at Fairview and Porterville until the facilities close. Part of the issue is determining what is available in the community and what will we need to develop going forward, working with the regional centers. But using the CPP budget, we believe that we'll be able to find a way to get those resources in the community, make them available.
I appreciate the reassurance. I do think the specialized nature and the skill set of people working, I'm familiar with the resources there at Sonoma, it just doesn't seem realistic that those would be replicated community by community. And I'm wondering, is there a prospect for maintaining some centralized support of that nature, even if not located at the Sonoma Development Center, but perhaps at another regional center that could serve a broader population, multi-regional?
Yes, and I think that's a question that we'll be working not only in the meetings that we've proposed with the Sonoma Developmental Center Coalition, but also through the Developmental Services Task Force. We see that as part of the safety net issue, and how do we address it and ensure that those services are available, in a reasonable proximity to people in the community.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for the work you're all doing to move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Senator McGuire.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. It's good to see you, and thank you for allowing me to crash the committee as well. So very grateful. Thank you so much, and as well as Senator Money and Senator Stone. Just have a few questions.
Proceed.
Okay, there we go. And again, thank you so much. I do want to welcome the director. Look forward to sitting down. I think we're sitting down next week, so really looking forward to working with you. I know the folks from Sonoma are also looking forward to getting together as well. A lot of my comments are going to be focused on Sonoma. I apologize about the bias there, but want to just continue the discussion. I do want to say thank you to Mr. Doyle. Appreciated our kickoff meeting last month and for all the work that you've been doing. So it's good to see you again, sir. My goodness. Another thank you is I want to say thank you to the department for establishing those monthly meetings with those who are at the Sonoma Developmental Center and in particular with PHA. So greatly appreciate that in advancing those facilitated meetings. There are several areas I'd like to be able to cover. The first one is the assessment of the DC property and taking a look at specialty services on the grounds. So one of the items is that we have a crisis unit on the ground, 5-bed. That I think we were at 4 full last month. I think we're going to be at 5 full this month. And it seems like there may be enough volume, if you will, to be able to look at some type of expansion, in particular if we're taking a look at the developmental center closing. I'm wondering if that assessment is going to include that crisis unit remaining on the campus, and then secondly, of a potential expansion of that crisis unit.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Senator, because both, not only the Northern Star home,
Correct.
which is at Sonoma, but the Southern Star as well, which is at Fairview.
Yep.
Is once we opened those beds, they filled very quickly.
Yeah.
And we know there's a need in the community because we have individuals who are located at facilities like College Hospital in Southern California. So we recognize the need. We're hopeful that the development of the enhanced behavioral support homes, the new models that we have, and the community crisis homes will provide some relief for the need for crisis homes. We're hoping that the behavioral modification services and supports that are going to be available at the enhanced behavioral support homes will prevent the escalation of an individual going into crisis and needing to end up in an acute crisis unit. So we're hopeful that that model will be successful. Obviously, we have not placed anyone in a home. We just got the regulations approved, so this is going to be, we're going to have lessons learned.
Sure. I think two things on that. I do want to get back to the original question of wondering if the assessment is going to include that crisis unit that is currently there, and if that could remain in that assessment. And the second piece is, and I share your hope, and not at all trying to be crass, but I think hope is a strategy. I think what we need to be able to see is potentially looking at that continuing to exist while seeing if there is additional volume that can be accomplished within the new homes that could be built. So what I would hope is that we're not going to see an end to that crisis unit that we know is in need, that would remain to exist. And if it is then deemed that another model works, that unit may be potentially phased out, but until then, that would remain open. And that's why I'm wondering if the assessment is going to be looking at that.
Well, the assessment is not focused as much on the programs that are being conducted at the property. It's focusing on the kind of the nature of the facility, the infrastructure, the zoning on the property, things like that. It doesn't really take into account what kinds of programs we're running, but we do intend, as I said, to keep the crisis units open while the facility is in operation. I think once individuals transition out into the community and we have a better idea of where people end up, and particularly where individuals who have significant behavioral issues end up, I think that will help inform where we locate the place of last resort that I think, people are looking for the state to provide.
And I think we can take this offline to our monthly meeting, but my final point on this, Madam Chair, is that we have a system, we have a unit that is currently there, is working. And it's not like we're looking at a catchment area that is just the most immediate 3 counties surrounding Sonoma. And it is a greater catchment area around Northern California, and it could even individuals could come in from Southern California. And what I would hope is that there is a dual strategy of looking at either purchasing or building these new units. What I mean by units is these homes, while keeping this operational until we see if the new model works. Because what I'm concerned about, and this is a similar thing that we've had discussions about before, is that we shut everything down, and then we realize 2 years later that those new homes don't work, or that we still need capacity. So that's why I would hope that we're looking at this assessment as there are some things that are currently working on that campus, and I also understand, and I'm going to speak for myself, that the department may be concerned if one area stays open, then would there be concern that folks who want to keep everything open? But I think that this is a realistic view, and it should be assessed.
Sure, and I think that, not only the meetings that we're having with the coalition, but the task force meetings, I think, are an appropriate forum to decide how do we move this forward, because you're right, we know it's a concern, and we see the results just in the populations that we have in our acute crisis centers.
Okay, so another question is, I want to go back to the Secretary's task force report back from 2014, and looking at that issue of facility of last resort, that would be a state-run facility for individuals with significant behavioral challenges. And I just want to make sure that we are tracking on the issue of definition in regards to that and what your vision is for that.
Well, I think that, what a place of last resort looks like is...
Because it's been blended in some of the discussions, that's why I ask.
And yes, and it's obviously, it's seen as a state responsibility. And what that looks like as far as facility type, I think that's part of the discussion that we need to have, because there are various ways to manage populations that are difficult to serve, various ways to, provide services efficiently and appropriately. So I think that's part of it. We don't, obviously we don't have a solution yet for what the place of last resort looks like. We think it's important to have meetings with the community, with consumers, with families, to get their perspective on this. So,
and I think what we've heard, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think there's been a pretty clear vision articulated by at least those that are involved in SCC. I think what I've heard, though, is from the department is that it's, and these are my words, it's a to be continued, because we need to be able to see what the need is. And that's why I ask, I do believe this is getting blended, and I would hope, since time is ticking and that we're tracking a bit behind where the department thought we were, of bringing real definition, and that definition would then bring what the resources are going to be needed, either to keep it open or potentially look elsewhere. And especially since time's ticking in regards to the 3 years, Now, I've been concerned about that, but we'll talk about that further later. Another question in regards to residences out in the community. And obviously, there's overall concern, particularly within the greater Bay Area, or even in the Los Angeles area, just about the price of real estate. Yeah, affordability. I know regional centers are saying that they're going to be able to work this, and that's something that they're really working on. But I'd like to be able to go to the beds that are on hold. What I believe I heard, the strategy of having those beds that are on hold. And I thought I had heard you say is that regional centers would need to be able to make a request to the department if they wanted to be able to utilize that strategy. Was I correct in hearing that?
Yeah, basically, if a provider goes to the regional center and says, look, we expected to be at capacity by now, we're not, we need additional funding to hold this bed open. The regional center can come to us, we can work through the details and figure out whether the request has merit.
So is anyone, since I believe what we heard at the joint hearing is that was a successful strategy, and it would give the state priority to be able to get them filled because the state is essentially paying for it, right? So has any regional center asked for this yet?
Not to my knowledge, not on the homes that we're developing for Sonoma.
So is that something that it's been articulated to the regional centers that if this is a necessity, please request it?
If regional centers are aware that if they have a situation like that, that they can come to us and we can work through it.
But they know to ask is what I'm asking you.
They know that the option exists.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Because that's not new.
No.
Right.
But my recollection of the joint hearing discussion, I thought was framed a little differently than the way you responded to the question, because you kept referring to startup. So in my mind, in the startup phase, a bed could be put on hold, but that need could go beyond kind of the startup phase of a new home.
Absolutely. And one of the things, for example, the community crisis homes, I think, are a good example of that. Individuals will only be, hopefully the intent is to have individuals in those beds for short terms.
Right.
And so there is continued funding for those beds because you can't turn it on and off, So that's an example where there will be continued funding so that as individuals transition in and out, providers still can, afford to run the home.
Go ahead, Senator McGuire, I'm sorry.
No. Thank you, Madam Chair. So in a related question, so I believe a little over 200 folks would be transitioning into the community this year. And are we on track on hitting the necessary space that would need to be available in the community with the number of residents that would be transitioning?
Yes, it's not a housing resource issue in the community. It's more
like IPP and
ready to transition. And just to specify, that 202 number that we're talking about is individuals coming out of all facilities.
Correct, system-wide. Absolutely, thank you. If we can talk about staffing for a second, and I just want to build upon where the chair was at. And so you were saying that you're looking at this budget year, looking into 16, 17, I should say, is when a retention plan, and that could mean, I'm making this up right now, retention bonuses, for example, again, making that up, or an implementation of a state staff plan would be introduced and vetted through the process in May so that it could be reviewed.
Yeah, again, I can't make that commitment because it's,
Carla Castañeda, the Department of Finance, and that's exactly what we were actually going to say is, well, that's a reasonable assumption. We couldn't commit to that as the discussions are underway, and we still have to work on details and costing out options.
I guess, and I greatly appreciate that and the due diligence that needs to go into it. I think that we're now at a point, in its human nature, where folks are starting to fear for their job. And this is an issue that needs to get resolved sooner rather than later, and I know you're very aware of that. But we've been talking about this now for the greater part of over 12 months now. And the closer we get to deadline, and it's, again, human nature, and folks need to feed their kids, right? They need to find other alternatives. So I know you're costing it out, but I think that the longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes. All right. So I hear that's to be continued and that you're ready to roll for May.
This light doesn't always work.
Hey, there you go.
Just that the administration can't commit to the specific timeframe. Thank you.
Good times. So I'd like to just talk about medical and mental health. I think that on the issue on having services available in the community, my belief is those discussions have just started. And I know that the county who is here today, and I think we've all received the packet, I know that's a discussion that has begun about how the county of Sonoma at least can work with the regional center there in the North Bay to be able to look at a holistic view of specialty services, as Senator Monning had mentioned, in regards to mental health, dental, medical, et cetera. And I do believe that regional centers now have dollars from this current year's budget to start moving on those plans for the specialty services, mental health, dental, and medical. Correct? Okay. Is there any plan to be able to use existing staff, or has there been any discussions with the regional centers of using existing staff, medical, mental health, dental staff, as a priority to be able to fill those positions, whether it's in the community or continued state service? Can you talk about that?
Sure. As we've discussed, this is an issue that is of significant concern to the department, and because we're concerned about losing a valuable resource, we would like to see well-trained staff that work at the developmental centers remain in the system. We are working with regional centers, and for example, Regional Center of the East Bay is looking to hire 2 nurses, and so the hope is that there will be individuals from Sonoma that will be interested in going to East Bay Regional Center. Now, those, obviously that's one example, but this is an area that we know requires attention. We want to ensure that, to the extent possible, we make community state staff attractive to providers, and we're looking at ways to do that. We also are interested in ensuring that staff who are interested have the ability to become vendors. Right now, there is a prohibition on becoming a vendor in that an individual has to resign their position with the state. And so if you're just trying to start out as a new service provider, that lack of income can make it very difficult to proceed with your plans. So we're looking at ways that maybe we could resolve that issue as well. So these are all things that we're considering.
And what would that take in regards to being able to change that so that you have staff having the ability to be able to become that vendor? So what?
That's simply a language change. It just removes the prohibition that currently exists in statute.
Okay, that's great. I think I am done. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle, and look forward to getting back together. And I know, Madam Director, they're looking forward to talking with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate you. We'll open it up to public comment. Again, we're on issue 2. Mad rush for the mic. Issue 2, specifically closure of the developmental centers.
Yes.
That's the topic that we'll be commenting on
Right.
specifically. Thank you. First witness.
Connie Lapin again. I want to put a human face on this. I said I was a mom, but I have a son who's 48 who has a severe challenge of autism. And I live and breathe severe challenges. And so I was very interested in the closure plan. And to me, it's a roadmap. It's a template that we can use in our system. And also, on another issue, but it's the same issue in a way, is when we transition to the new HCBS waiver. It's a good model. I am on the DC task force. I am on the DS task force. And one of the things that happened is my son, Sean, was the first poster child for autism in 1974. I consider him now a poster child of what can go wrong in the system and when there's no treatment or bad treatment. And I was always in the community, talking about the community, and the DC parents were talking about the DCs, and we weren't on the same side. And I don't know if anyone was in that hearing, but there was a budget hearing, and I finally said, I'm done. It's not going to be my way or your way. We all want the same thing, and that's what happened at the DC task force. We wanted a place that could say no, that couldn't say no, a place of last resort. And I'm grateful that this subject is so hot. I mean, and you're all agreeing that it needs to happen. And I want to thank the staff for putting it on the agenda and asking so many questions, because it's very sad to me. On page 14 and 15, item 3, I want to echo your concern that there are no crisis service capacity and placements of last resort. And I think I have some good news for you. I have an answer with a timeline, like now. There should be a crisis intervention team available. The person-centered advocacy philosophy is it's about a person, and crisis can't wait. And we have crises ongoing, and it costs more money, and it creates more work. And I don't want to see the placement of last resort, the criminal justice system, the Institute of Mental Disease, and involuntary hospitalization, College Hospital. And by the way, they don't get federal funds. So I want to echo, and I want to make myself available, and a lot of us out there with people with intense needs, to help this happen. And it can happen now. I don't want to wait for the homes. I know that they're well-intended, and I know that we need them. I'm not saying either or, but today, now. Crisis means now. Thank you.
My duty as chair to set a time frame for public comment. So typically in this committee, we try to go 2 minutes. And so just because we've got a long agenda, and I know many of you will come back on repeated issues, I'm going to ask you to generally try to stick to a 2-minute time frame, if you will, out of respect to your other colleagues toward the end of the line.
Madam Chair, I'll try to be faster. Madam Chair and members, thank you very much for all the hard work that you do. I think what the department report shows is the difficulty in the creation of new homes, support, and services in the community. And I wanted to talk about SDC. 5 years ago or so, Hal Belmont and I put together a group of people who had seen how difficult it was for the Agnews closure to succeed. And with that wisdom, we put together something called the Jack London Meadows Plan. And some of you may have seen it. I know we've shown it to Member Stone, Senator McGuire. And the idea was simply that instead of finding resources in the community that the regional centers would manage, use the staff expertise that has been developed at Sonoma for nearly 100 years, and build an inclusive community there, keeping the staff and the resources that you have, the expertise staff that you have there. And so this would be managed by the regional centers, and we would keep the assets. I'm encouraged by the plan from the county that may dovetail into this as well. So what we advocate is that instead of moving the people into the community, we move the community to Sonoma. That the land that's so difficult to find outside is available now because of the way that the closure plan has been set up. The land is not destined to be surplus land. And that these could create care opportunities for people of similar needs in this inclusive community, for people with autism, Alzheimer's, returning vets. They have needs that are very similar that would benefit from living in an inclusive community there, rather than looking for resources outside. I thank you very much.
Come back a quick second, because I haven't seen the plan. And just, do you envision using the land and new structures, or do you envision bringing other members of the broader community, as you suggested, into the physical plant that is now Sonoma?
I think to be completely compliant with Lanterman, as we want to, as we need to, we would have a community that would be as inclusive as a community, as homes in the community, They would just be at Sonoma, where you have the resources of the staff and other resources that are being deemed worthy of maintaining as a resource for the regional centers to use to support these people in need.
So new structures on the Sonoma land.
So I think there's an assessment that's underway about whether those structures could be used and would also be compliant with Lanterman. But one easy vision is that most of the existing structures would be deemed unworthy, non-compliant, they would be torn down, and an inclusive community would be built, stretching from the north to the south.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next witness, please.